US is one of the leading developed countries in the world, but when it comes to gun violence, is it falling behind the rest? Gun violence in the US is a major politically dividing issue. No other developed country has such a high rate of gun violence. Hello, Thrill Thinkers! A 2016 study in the American Journal of Medicine found that Americans are 25 times more likely to die from gun homicide than their counterparts in other wealthy countries. According to Northeastern and Harvard University researchers, there are approximately 265 million privately owned guns in the US. In fact, US citizens own 40% of all guns in the world. Guns rights activists in the US argue that the Second Amendment of the US Constitution protects individual gun ownership. The Second Amendment reads, "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." Today there is much debate on what the framers actually meant by this. Does this mean the citizens have a right to bear arms, as can be deduced by the language, "the right of the people to keep and bear arms"? Or did the framers mean the Congress does not have the right to interfere in the military's right to bear arms, as can be deduced by the prefatory language, "a well-regulated militia"? Guns rights activists also argue that guns reduce crime. The thinking behind this argument is that if people carried guns to protect themselves, there would be less violent crime. Author of More Guns, Less Crime, John R. Lott Jr. states, "For each additional year that a concealed handgun law is in effect, the murder rate declines by 3%, rape by 2%, and robberies by over 2%. The analysis is based on data from all 3,054 counties in the United States during 18 years from 1977 to 1994. However, when research was conducted by a Stanford University law professor looking at data across all 50 states and the District of Columbia over the period from 1977 through 2014, the results found that allowing citizens to carry concealed handguns showed an increase in violent crime, which essentially rose to a 15% increase after 10 years of existence of the right to carry a concealed weapon. Gun rights activists also make the argument that guns are meant for self-defense and safety measures. The Institute of Medicine and National Research Council concluded in a 2013 review that studies that directly assess the effect of actual defensive uses of guns have found consistently lower injury rates among gun-using crime victims compared with victims who used other self-protective strategies. A 2010 study published in Crime and Delinquency found that resistance with a gun decreased the odds of robbery and rape completion by 93% and 92% respectively. However, according to a Harvard University analysis of figures from the National Crime Victimization Survey, people defended themselves with a gun in nearly 0.9% of crimes from 2007 to 2011. Gun rights activists also claim the right to own guns for hunting and sport. According to Pew Research Center, a nonpartisan American fact tank, a 2017 survey shows that while many gun owners say they have more than one reason for owning a firearm, 67% say it's for protection, 38% say hunting, and 30% say sport shooting. While many gun rights activists and gun control activists agree that background checks are necessary, some gun rights activists argue that background checks are an invasion of privacy. Under federal law, licensed gun dealers are required to conduct a background check before transferring a gun. However, private individuals are free to sell guns without conducting a background check. 22 states have passed laws that close this loophole in background checks. Gun rights activists argue that expanding the background check makes little sense, since criminals can always obtain weapons on the black market through buyers with clean records or by theft. Gun rights activists also argue for the need of protection from acts of terror. From this point of view, the right to bear arms is not limited to military, because the Constitution intended its citizens to be able to assist in defense if or when needed. This argument circles back to the Second Amendment, and if the right to bear arms is intended for military or citizens or both. So far, we have presented a number of arguments from gun rights activists. Let's have a look at the gun control side. Gun control activists argue that gun control could reduce gun-related deaths. The presence of a gun makes conflict more likely to become violent. The presence of a gun also makes accidental deaths more likely. After the Sandy Hook shooting in 2012 in Connecticut, people bought lots of guns as a result of fearing guns would be harder to obtain. Following this spike in gun sales, 40 adults and 20 children died as a result of those additional gun sales. Gun control activists also argue that gun control would protect women from domestic abuse. According to the American Journal of Epidemiology, of the 1,352 intimate partner homicides in 2015, 55% were committed with firearms. Abused women are 5 times more likely to be killed by their abuser if the abuser has access to a gun. Gun control activists also argue that guns are rarely used in self-defense. As previously mentioned, according to a Harvard University analysis of figures from the National Crime Victimization Survey, people defended themselves with a gun in nearly 0.9% of crimes from 2007 to 2011. Gun control activists also argue that legally owned guns are often stolen and used by criminals. According to data from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, between 2012 and 2015, approximately 1.2 million guns were stolen from individuals, and 22,000 guns were stolen from gun stores. A gun is stolen in the US every 2 minutes. Gun control activists are pushing for laws that require guns to be properly secured and for gun thefts to be promptly reported. Another incentive for gun control is to reduce societal costs associated with gun violence. According to the Pacific Institute for Research and Evaluation, in 2010, gun violence cost each person in the United States roughly $564, and the US government roughly $5.5 billion in lost tax revenue. It also cost the nation $1.4 billion in Medicare and Medicaid costs. 84% of those injured by firearms are uninsured, leaving taxpayers responsible for most of those bills through programs like Medicaid. Maybe the biggest incentive for gun control should be fewer suicides. Gun control activists argue that easy access to guns makes those in distress even more vulnerable. In 2016, nearly 60% of gun-related deaths were self-inflicted. In the United States, cause of death by firearm is as follows: 59% suicide, 37% homicide, 1.3% accidental, 1.3% by law enforcement, and 0.8% undetermined. Less than 1% of deaths are a result of public mass shootings. A mass shooting is defined as a shooting resulting in more than 3 deaths. Let's take a look at how other developed countries have reacted to gun violence. In the UK, after 16 5- and 6-year-olds were killed in Dunblane Primary School in 1996, the nation was angered, and the Firearms Amendment Act of 1997 was passed. It banned all cartridge ammunition handguns. Along with the legislation, strict enforcement of the law by local authorities resulted in a sharp decline in gun crime by the 2000s. In Japan, there is pretty much zero tolerance for guns. Civilian ownership of handguns is banned. The process to obtain a shotgun for sport includes attending classes and passing exams. Written, practical, and psychological. Background checks extend to the applicant and the applicant's family. The objective is clearly to make shotgun ownership so lengthy and difficult that very few people would be motivated enough to do it. In Australia, after 35 people were shot dead in a gift shop in 1996, President Howard enforced regulation which required people to have a genuine reason for having a firearm. He also began a national gun buyback for all weapons that did not comply. 650,000 firearms were bought back by the Australian government for $350 million. A study said the buyback resulted in 74% decrease in gun suicides in the next 10 years. In just 2018 alone, the number of mass shootings in the US was over 300. Is that the price of freedom? What do you think about the gun controversy in the United States? Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. If you found this video interesting, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. As always, thank you for watching.